This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
All right, good evening. One of the things, one of the tools, and I will present a few tools tonight that I have found very useful in my life, and probably many of you use as well, as breath. And by really being more conscious of our breathing, and particularly inviting deep breathing, it can really help to shift us into a deeper, more expanded consciousness. So I'll occasionally be inviting you, as I'd like to right now, so I'll take a full deep breath together. And I'd like to share a little poem with you. In the deepest depths of you and me, in the deepest depths of we, lies the most beautiful jewel, shining forth eternally. Within that precious jewel, within that priceless piece of we, lies a time beyond all time, lies a place beyond all space. Within that sacred source of radiance lies a love beyond all love, waiting, 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 ever so patiently, waiting for you, waiting for me, waiting patiently for all to see the beauty that is you inside of me. The beauty that is me inside of thee. In the deepest depths of you and me, in the deepest depths of we, lies the love and wisdom of all eternity. All right, so I'll take a deep breath. So the title of the talk tonight is You, Me, and We, Mirrors of God Unfolding. And I'll be sharing some of my own personal journey and how I've come to this place where I really see each one of you as a reflection of me, as a reflection of the divine, and see myself even as a mirror to you. And probably many of you know that as human beings, we tend to be projecting machines. Any problem, we tend to want to project it out and blame it on that person. But what I have found is that when I find myself projecting blame, if I put up a mirror and can hold it there purely, there it is in me. And that's a very, very powerful peace that can come. So I have kind of an interesting role because let me, if I could just get a quick hand raise. How many people are familiar with the website wanttoknow.info? If you just raise your hand so I can have an idea. Okay, just a couple, okay. Any people who are familiar with any of the other websites of peers which I manage? Okay, all right, it's just a couple, so okay, that's great actually.
wanttoknow.org.
wanttoknow.info. And I've got some cards up here on the table, so on your way out, if you want, you can grab a card, and it lists several of the websites. Well, I guess what I'd like to do then is to, well, first what I'd like to do is tell you the deepest part of who I am. And the deepest part of who I am is my intentions. I really find that's, for me, the key driving force of my life. And by far, my deepest intention is I will do my best to choose what's best for all. And another great way I like to say the same thing is I give all that I am into the service of all that is. So I very much surrender myself to being a tool and vessel of the divine and serving all of us, which includes me. In fact, what I find is there's the me and the you and the we. Well, that the me is almost like 50%, because my experience is a huge part of who I am. And so in that all that is that I'm serving, it's almost like me is 50%. But then equally out there is like the other half is all of you. And so there are many people who sacrifice themselves. I'm sure you all know this, maybe some of you, I've certainly done this, so much that they end up being drained and less effective. So if you're just in service to all of you, it actually maybe is not served the best way you can serve all that is. So that's the deepest part of who I am, and because of that, I like to start any presentation like this with just taking a minute to call in support towards that end. Particularly what I like to call in the heart energy of each of us here. Invite our hearts to open to each other and feel whatever connection is meant to be here tonight. Invite our bodies, our spirits, our minds to be fully present and available for whatever is meant to be here. Invite our guardian spirits, our guardian angels, all that is, to be here with us and help us to open to whatever is best for each one of us and for all of us and for all beings. Let's all take a deep breath with that. So I want to take a read, because there's so many things we could talk about. How many people here are deeply interested in sort of the what I call the cover-up topics, UFOs, 9/11, media cover-up and stuff like that? Raise your hands if that's your primary interest. Oh, very few, okay. All right, so I will just mention briefly then my life journey. I've been on a personal growth path from a very young age. My father was a minister. So it really caused me to ask a lot of questions. Any sons of or daughters of priests, ministers out there? There's something we call PK syndrome, preacher's kid. And all preacher's kids know what that means. And if you think about it, it makes sense. You've got your dad standing up in the pulpit, everybody admires him and thinks he's a great man, and a part of him really is, and we know that as kids. But guess what? When he's at home, he's as human as ever. And I got belted sometimes for stuff that just, and he is a great man, and we've become wonderful, wonderful friends, me and my dad. But I, being a typical PK, rebelled pretty strongly against my dad and against the religion and all that sort of stuff. But I did not rebel against spirituality. I always felt that there probably was some sort of greater presence. And I didn't know if it was a god or what, but being out in nature, and one of the things my dad did was he took us on these great vacations to all the national parks where we camped in tents and hiked and backpacked, and I'm sure a lot of you have done some of that in beautiful Rogue Valley here. And you can just feel the connection with something greater. And so from a young age, I felt that, but I rebelled against traditional religion. And interestingly enough, my father was a conspiracy theorist, even though he was a minister. He was a very radical Methodist minister, which there were a few, especially around where we lived. He had friends that were other ministers that were radicals. They literally would sail their canoes and boats in front of nuclear aircraft carriers and get arrested and thrown in jail as a form of civil disobedience. He always tried to get us 4 kids to go with him, and we're like, no, Dad, you go do your thing, you know. And, you know, he wanted us to believe in all these conspiracy theories, like there was this, you know, basically evil group of men, including Ronald Reagan and Nixon and all those guys who were out to control the world. And I'll tell you, that's pretty funny, because when I was 10 years old, I'm 52 now, so that was 1968, and Nixon got elected. And my dad told me before the election, and I was campaigning in 5th grade, I was class president and kind of like trying to get support for, who was Nixon running against? I don't even remember. Humphrey? You remember Humphrey? Yeah. I think it was later. But anyway. And my dad said, if Nixon is elected, almost certainly by the end of his 4-year term, we're going to be in the 3rd World War, the world's going to be destroyed, and it's like, there's going to be nothing left. And as a somewhat impressionable 10-year-old kid, I had my rebellious, but it's like, wow, Dad knows a lot. And so I kind of, wow, that's pretty intense. But so you can imagine when Nixon not only survived 4 years and the world still was pretty intact. I mean, certainly it may not have been as pretty as it was before he was elected. But he got reelected and then kicked out of office. And it really made me question, you know, everything my dad said about his conspiracy theories. But the funny thing that happened, and I got on a very solid spiritual path when I was 18, and believe it or not, I got involved with a group of born-again Christians who were some of the most loving people I've ever met in my life. And we were all 16 to 19 years old and hung out together for like 2 or 3 years. But these people were true Christians. In fact, what they preached and taught was love. They did believe in the Bible. Most of them even believed in the Bible as an infallible word of God, and I never bought into that, even though I was one of the leaders of the group. And they were okay with that. That's what's amazing. I actually never gave my life to Christ with them. And that's how good this group was. They would, at least once every month or two, one of them would pull me aside and say, just want to check in, Fred, where are you at? You think you might be ready to commit your life to Christ, you know? And I would say, thank you so much for caring. And you know, I am so committed to spreading love in this world. I believe Jesus was an amazing spiritual being on this planet. But I don't know about this God thing. I was kind of agnostic. I knew there was something greater, but I didn't know about God. And they were totally okay with that. Say, okay, just checking in, you know. And I would always say, this is the thing that I would always say to them, please pray not that I become a Christian. Pray that God, because I knew they believed in him, but that God leads me down the path that is best for me and for all of us. And they did. And I think that made a huge shift in my life, because having this community of amazing, loving people, and we really were tight. We were like, every minute we could get, we'd spend together. And not that we didn't have our problems like any group, but it was pretty rich. And I had all these people praying for me for what was best. And that put me onto this path that was pretty magical. My life has been very, very blessed and magical for many years. And so I'm kind of trying to link this in. Basically, jumping ahead quite a few years. It was, I think, late 2000, which is, 9 years ago now, when I'd done a lot of spiritual work on myself and really made a lot of progress and able to identify some of my deep core issues and work with them and really become what I felt like was being able to live fully. In fact, I really didn't get clear until about somewhere, I'm going to guess around 91, 92, that I was 100% committed to what's best for all beings. I may not have used those exact words back then, but dedicating my service, because what I really got is that God, for me, is the collective energy, the collective beingness of all beings in the universe. So for me, that's what God was and is. It's this holographic collective of all that is. And so, having given myself 100% to that pursuit, I had all sorts of wonderful magic and miracles happen. And then, as I was saying, about 2000, I got to a place like, wow, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. And sure enough, I put out a prayer and said, okay, Spirit, my favorite, all that is my most exact description of what I call God, that greater thing. So all that is, but the simpler way to say it is spirit, the one that people can connect with more. And I often, even in my prayers, I'd say spirit. So I said, Spirit, I think I'm ready. I'm ready now to see the deepest, darkest parts of myself that I've been afraid to look at before. And so I ask you, not all at once, I don't want to be overwhelmed, but please help me to see so that I can become conscious and bring those parts conscious and become even a better person and a better, able to serve all of us. And so the very strange thing that happened out of that is within a few months I started getting some really bizarre information about things going on in the world. Things related to, well, the first big thing was UFOs. And like, those of you who are familiar with the Metaphysical Library here, one of the big focus is on sort of information about UFOs. And before that, I had believed, of course, there must be extraterrestrial civilizations. I mean, with all the billions and billions of stars out there and billions of planets, it'd be arrogant to think that only in this one little place that life formed and developed. So, but I had never heard anything current to convince me. I'd never seen a UFO, and I had seen like Chariots of the Gods, which really raised questions in my mind, like, oh, maybe they were here once and did something. Any of you see Chariots of the Gods? It's a pretty amazing movie that has evidence about how could ancient man have ever done that. Basically, you go, it's pretty much impossible. And so that opened my mind somewhat. But then in 2001, not too long after that prayer, some things happened. I don't want to get too detailed, but the main thing that happened was I saw this video of a guy named Stephen Greer, who's an emergency room doctor who gave up his very high-paying career, and he was the head of the emergency room in this large hospital in the southeast, to become basically a UFO activist. And he became the man to go to for any government and military insiders who had personal experience with UFOs and a major UFO cover-up. And so what Dr. Greer did was he eventually had personal contact with over 400 military and government witnesses who had personal involvement or personal knowledge that was independently verifiable of a UFO cover-up. Not only that, 100 of them he had videotaped. He'd go out and videotape an hour to 2 hours of them just letting their story out. And Greer, for some reason, was able to provide some sort of protection because it was known that if you let these secrets out, sometimes you were disappeared. And I can show you a quote in the New York Times that even talks about that. That was on page L30 of the New York Times, and it was spoken by a former chief of the CIA. So Greer put all these people on film. Not only that, he then put it all together and condensed the best of their testimonies down into like 2 hours worth of film. And then the thing that I saw was he invited 22 of these key witnesses who were willing to have name, rank, and serial number described, go to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., which is one of the most prestigious, is probably the most prestigious press organization in the United States. And they often have key, somewhat controversial speakers go there so the press can all cover it, and then they can spread it out because they create these wonderful press events. Well, Greer managed to get himself invited to bring 22 of his key witnesses. About half of them were military people, name, rank, and serial number. The other half were top government and a few top industry people, highly respectable people. I should mention that at the time, I was working as a language interpreter, and as I say, my life's been very blessed. It's kind of very strange and miraculous how I even came to become a language interpreter. But once I did, without even trying, I immediately realized I was a good interpreter because I was doing simultaneous on regular consecutive stuff. Simultaneous is when you're speaking at the same time as they're speaking and you never stop. I just had a good knack for that. And so within a month of becoming an interpreter, I was already doing simultaneous stuff. So I realized, wow, if I tried, maybe I could even move up and get into the top ranks of interpreters. But really, my whole life, adult life particularly, I've been deeply dedicated to spirituality. I said, no, if I do that, it's going to pull me off my spiritual path. So I said, "Oh, I'm just going to be happy being a low-level interpreter, pays the bills, and I really love it. It was a great job." And just go that way. But then magic started happening, and boom, next thing I know, there's 3 levels in the State Department. I worked for the U.S. State Department as interpreter, and got moved up to the middle level. And then at the middle level, there's a shortage of Indonesian interpreters. I spoke Indonesian, which is a language that very few people in this country speak. And so, because there was this huge shortage, and they only at the time had 1 top-level Indonesian interpreter in the entire country, and he wasn't available. And so in 1995, they asked me if I could fly to Copenhagen, like this was just a few days, and interpret for Al Gore. And I'm like, sure. And I did great, and so they knocked me up, and I eventually became the top Indonesian interpreter in the State Department. The reason I bring that up is because I used to interpret for top generals. I even interpreted for Bush and Clinton, and a bunch of, over in Europe, interpreted for a number of heads of state over there when there was international meetings. So I was very familiar with the military mentality. I actually have a lot of respect for the military. For all that, I don't think war is ever the answer. I don't think there's any reason to have war. But I do understand why it's happening. I just don't particularly agree with the reasons why it's happening. I really had a lot of respect. The military people really care about our country, most of them. Not all of them, but most of them, and really are doing what they believe to be the right thing. And they were very open and honest with me. I didn't hide that I was progressive. I've always been quite progressive in my politics. I avoid liberal conservative because I think that's a split. Progressive means we can all progress and build a better world. And they never had a problem. I think people really appreciate my whole life. I'm really transparent. It's like, I respect your opinion, and I'm not going to hide mine. I'm just a progressive, and I have a deep spiritual base. So, I would be literally rubbing shoulders with 4-star generals, and be occasionally sitting at Bush's elbow right here and interpreting these high-level, top-secret meetings. And the first time it happened, it kind of blew me away. I'm talented and stuff, but it's like, it's weird, interpreting for the president. It kind of blew me, and I never even tried, like I said. But the thing is, once that started happening, I just knew. I said, oh, I know why this is happening, because I know how to be a vehicle of the divine, how to let divine energies flow through me. And so when I was in these meetings, the great thing about high-level meetings is the top-level meetings, they don't do simultaneous, where you're speaking all the time, because there's a whole lot of protocol. When you get at the really high levels, the Indonesians have their interpreter and the Americans have their interpreter. And so whenever their interpreter was speaking and their principal speakers, I would be sitting there just literally channeling energy and saying, I just want to support all these people in opening up to our heart connection. I want to support all these people in just opening up to doing what's right for all of us, for our world, and not being focused on the sort of power agendas. So I just knew that's why I got this job, that's why I was doing this. And it was great, and some really wild stuff happened. And I don't want to take up too much time with my story. If anybody's interested later, I have tons of amazing little miraculous stories that actually happened even with presidents. But suffice it to say, I had a lot of respect for the military. I know that the military only lie in general when there's a really very good reason for it. And so here I see these 22 witnesses, including some high-level military people, and including the Chief of Accidents and Investigations from the FAA. Think about that, the Chief of Accidents Investigations at the FAA, saying that he was holding up, I've got the film right here, and ABC News, NBC, Washington Post, they're all there at this National Press Club conferences. I've got the video here, I've got the audio, I've got pilot's testimony that this UFO was literally bouncing very close, like in impossible ways around this aircraft. That was his particular testimony. And so if it had just been 2 or 3 or 4 witnesses, I really would have said, now wait a minute, what's going on here? But it was 22 witnesses, all of whom, I would say out of those 22, I felt like I could really trust 18 of them. There was only 3 or 4 that seemed a little dicey to me. And they had these amazing, amazing stories. How many people here know about Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project? Okay, not a lot. Okay. So if you're ever interested, you can Google that or just... Oh yeah, it's down here in this library. I've got lots of information on it, and I don't think Jordan would mind my saying it's one of his favorite topics. So I watched that film, and literally my jaw was on the floor. I'm just going, oh my God, how could this be? Because here I had been in top level secret meetings and all this sort of stuff, been hanging out with these generals, and no one had ever mentioned UFOs. And so in my mind, as I said, of course they must exist somewhere, but I'd never seen any solid evidence. And suddenly to have this huge, 22 witnesses sharing incredible information, and some of it was really bizarre, but these are from such reliable witnesses that I just had to completely suspend belief and to say, okay, obviously there's some kind of cover-up going on, I gotta find out what it is. And so that started me down this whole path, which is why I asked how many people know about wanttoknow.info, because I'm actually best known in this world for my work in cover-ups, even though I'm also very much a spiritual activist. I manage a small nonprofit that now has 11 websites, and it's called Peers. And there's cards up here that you can take on your way out. And
How do you spell that?
Peers, P-E-E-R-S, and it stands for Public Education and Empowerment Resource Service. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. And it's all about educating and empowering the public. And we do that from a variety of means. We do it from really solid spiritual stuff, all about being interconnected and opening our heart energies. But we also feel it's important to explore the shadow sides and what's really going on in the world, because if we ignore it and aren't conscious of it, it can just grow and fester and become worse. And so tying back into my original prayer to look at the deepest, darkest parts of myself, the strange answer that I got to that was to actually see some of the deepest, darkest parts of what's going out in the world, like this big cover-up around UFOs. And I knew, because in my spiritual world, we are mirrors for each other. We are all mirrors of God unfolding. That what is out there is reflecting something inside of me. And I knew that this whole major cover-up, and it wasn't just in UFOs, once I started going and learning about it, and then tapping into my sources, and because I had worked at high-level government, I had some good sources, I started finding about all these other cover-ups. I mean, some really weird, bizarre stuff, and finding out, I always knew the media was manipulated. I think everybody in the world knows the media is manipulated, right? One way or other, but I had no idea the degree and how it works and all that kind of stuff. And so I set my mind, well, if this stuff is happening, I better learn what's going on. And Stephen Greer, the man I mentioned who headed the UFO project, actually got to meet him and actually applied to work as his personal assistant. And there's a whole crazy, fun story around that. And it didn't work out because for all he's a wonderful, great man, he's not easy to work with, let's just say that. And
He's human.
he's very human. And he's not also. But he really said, if you want to know what's really going on in the world, he said, go to From the Wilderness website. And I'm actually not, these back then were the best websites. They're not the best websites anymore. But he said, go look at this website and that website, read this book. And he was very knowledgeable. I mean, this guy's brilliant. He really is an incredible genius. And so I worked back at his office for 2 weeks while we both agreed I wasn't going to work for him, but I would still support him in other ways. And so sure enough, I go and explore these websites, I get books, and for me, it's got to be reliable and verifiable, right? We're talking about stuff that most of the world doesn't believe in, doesn't know exists. And so I want to see the reliable, hard evidence. And he had it. Stephen Greer, he is well connected. I mean, he's better connected than I was by far. I mean, I had some inside connections through the government. He knows personally a lot of very high-level people. When I was volunteering in his office, Steven Spielberg's office called in. It wasn't Spielberg himself, but they're saying, we want to meet with Greer and have him involved in this project. So Greer is very well known among people, and you'd be surprised at how many people are aware of this UFO cover-up at the higher levels. All right, where was I going with that? So basically then what happened as a result of that, my prayer led to this knowledge of all these deep cover-ups. And after 9/11, I started the first website. This is before we had the nonprofit, and it was called Global Community for All. And it was an effort to say, what if we all joined in the belief that we can all work together for what's best? That we can all join in the belief that we want to open up to divine guidance, however you define the divine? And what if we all agree just to do our best to love, support, and empower each other? So that's what the first website I designed, Global Community for, which largely didn't go. It didn't happen. My dream was this could really spread and we could develop groups around the world. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great, right? Because I was just on fire, and it was after 9/11. Well, you know, you live and learn. And that website, it's still there. It's still one of the websites we have. We don't do anything with it anymore. And it still gets about 50 visits a day, which is not too bad. And it's got some great inspiring material on it. But I went on to other stuff, and once I really started getting connected into the whole cover-up stuff, I said, because there was so much verifiable information, and this is what really astounded me. We all know about the rumors about this and that, is that really happening or not? And there are a lot of false rumors out there, but there is so much solid information. I started scouring the internet to see, is there any website that does a really good job of putting all this reliable, verifiable information about the cover-ups together in one place, so that those who want to know can really go in and find out, and then have the links or the exact information. Here's how you go to verify this on everything that's mentioned. And I really hoped that somebody was doing it, because then I could just support them and not have to do the whole hassle of putting together a website myself, which I knew nothing about, by the way. That first website, you know, I eventually learned that, you guys know Microsoft Word, they have this one link that's like, turn it into a web page. So I could literally go here and I would type something up, and it automatically turns it into a web page, and then this is how you did it back then. I could just load it up onto the internet. And all of my web genius friends would say, oh, that's terrible, the code is all messed up, Microsoft Word is terrible. But I didn't know any better, and I wasn't going to pay anybody. I didn't have money, that much money to pay for anything. So the first website was quite a trip. But long story short, nobody had a good website out there. There were great websites like Greer's Disclosure Project website. Disclosureproject.org is an excellent website for UFOs to this day. It's not the best anymore, but it's really an excellent website. And there was great ones on the media cover-up. Project Censored up in Northern California is really a great website. There's excellent websites for 9/11 and other things that are going on. But nobody was bringing it all together in one place. And so I said, oh shoot, I guess I got to do it. Literally, I mean, I was not happy about this. But I said, if nobody's doing it, I got to do it. And so I started putting all the information together, and the keywords for the website is called Want to Know. It's only for those who want to know. But the keywords have always been reliable and verifiable. So, for instance, we've got, when we give the witness testimony on the UFOs, you can click on a link here and watch a video of these guys actually saying it. And for instance, when it's this article in the New York Times, we have a link to the New York Times archive. And I think the New York Times now charges $4.95, but for $4.95, you can go and read that original article and see the former chief of the CIA saying, top Air Force officials are soberly concerned about UFOs. They are being silenced from talking about it, as I said on page L30 of the New York Times. And not only that, we have the link, but then we take a copy, and because it costs $4.95 and we don't want you to have to spend $4.95, we put the article on our site for free. So you can always verify. We have it there, and then you can go pay and verify it. We have, for instance, a lot of government documents that you have to order. One of my areas of specialty, which may sound very bizarre to some of you, but is mind control. I'm just taking a straw poll here. How many people have ever heard of MK Ultra? Well, that's interesting. About 10 of you out of what I'm going to guess 30, 35 people here. So MK Ultra was a big government mind control project which was reported on extensively in the 1970s when it came out in the church hearings in 1976 in Congress. It was discovered that the CIA had these major, massive mind control programs going on there, and there's no doubt. And so we've got links to all the old New York Times articles about these things, plus a lot more recent ones. There have been declassified government documents that show how these programs are working. We've not only got to tell you exactly how to order this document, so it's interestingly enough, you order from the CIA through their Freedom of the Information Act, and you can look at these documents and go, whoa. So I don't want to go into this too much because that's not what you came here to hear, but that's what I've become most well known for on the internet, is because we have this really reliable, verifiable site for anybody who wants to know what's going on, that kind of stuff. And again, that links back to my prayer, which is a part of what my personal shift that's been really bizarre, which I think most of you will be interested in. I used to really consider myself a light worker. You know, I was out to really spread love and light in this world. And I still am, but it's really shifted. So what happened is I realized, wow, it's very clear that for whatever reason I'm supposed to understand all this deep dark stuff. And then once I started getting deeper, well, yeah, it is a mirror, and we all do have issues inside ourselves that we need to work on. I mean, who here doesn't have some sort of issues that you're trying to work and improve and make yourself better at? And in fact, I've come to see that there's a lot of core issues that a lot of people share. For instance, a lot of people have abandonment issues from when they were children. They got somehow abandoned, and to this day, abandonment is a big thing, whether their partner might leave them or whether they should leave their partner first so that they don't get abandoned. Rejection is another major issue. My own core issue, interestingly enough, is arrogance. From the time I was very young, and it's a long story about how it became that way, but I really thought I was better than everybody. But the funny thing, see, what happened is I actually got kind of beaten down when I was a little kid for trying to speak my truth, and I got slammed pretty hard for trying to speak my truth. And so what I know happened is I said, well, he is so wrong. This is my dad. He is so wrong. I absolutely knew he was wrong. What I had simply asked for the salt at the table, and my mom first wanted me to say thank you. And I said no. And she got upset, and finally she turned over to Dad, and he did his best, and I got spanked pretty hard. He told me he spanked me so hard that it hurt his hands. And this kind of thing happens. I've long since moved that. My dad and I have healed that one, and we're wonderful friends. But this is a part of what made me who I am. At 2 years old, I got beaten pretty badly for doing something that I knew was not wrong. I mean, I knew it might be a little bit wrong, not say thank you, but the levels that it went to. So the way he is wrong, the world is wrong, and I am right. I became a righteous little 2-year-old, and my mom will tell you this. And I became like my dad, who was a righteous father, as I'm telling you. He was just very much an activist, saved the world. And so the funny thing, I know I would never admit this to you when I was in my teens or early 20s, but now I see I became very much like my dad. And I'm right and you're wrong. That's an arrogance type thing that I actually had to deal with for many, many years. And it's still there, but I've done a lot of work on it. It's been really, really wonderful and powerful. So what we do with all these websites, there's only the one, pretty sure, it's only that one that's strictly focused on cover-ups. And it's addressed to that crowd, the people who are interested in what's really going on in the world. It does have a spiritual undertone, but on that website we do our very best to not inject any spiritual values. I shouldn't say values, any spiritual beliefs. We do have this, we do it from a place of it's not about inciting fear. It's all about this is powerful information that if we know about it, we can do something about it. And that's what's happening. And I could tell you magical, miracle stories where key people in this world have come to the website, had their eyes opened, and done something to change it in a major way. It's really been amazing. So that's been a gift in itself. And this gets back to how I went from being a light worker to now my favorite term for myself, because I like to kind of stimulate and challenge people on this, is I call myself a shadow dancer. And what's a shadow dancer? A shadow dancer is somebody who's not afraid of the shadows. I'm not afraid to look at the cover-ups, and I've looked at some really deep, ugly, the mind control stuff is really, really ugly. I don't advise you go there unless you've got a strong stomach and you feel called to it. But it's good to know at least the basics. And by the way, that's what I want to know that info. We have 2-page summaries of everything. And even if you don't think you want to know all this stuff, if you want to at least be basically informed, I recommend you look at just the 2-page summaries. You'll see it's very clear, verifiable information. You may not want to go any further, but I really believe it's important. I'll just say this. Light workers are doing wonderful work. I fully support them. And I think it's more powerful when you're willing to look at the shadows. To go into your own shadows and say, where am I betraying myself? Where am I, we all know the one pointing at you and it's 3 fingers pointing back at me. You know, I'm trying to blame you, but if I really use that mirror, it's coming from me. And what I have found, and maybe some of you, I'm just curious, how many of you are familiar with or even do some shadow work? A lot of people, okay. So well over half. So I'm just inviting the possibility that you can become even more effective, more expanded awareness and consciousness, and a better able to serve all of us when you're willing to look at the whole picture. Right? You all know that yin and yang symbol, right? It's got the black and the white, and yet right in the middle of the white is the black, and right in the middle of the black is light. In the deepest darkness, there is light. And in the greatest light, there is a core of darkness. You know, that emptiness and fullness are both beautiful aspects of existence. And if you think about it, you know, the feminine surrender, emptiness. And from that emptiness can be birth creation and fullness, which is associated with masculine. And these are just loose associations. I'm just using examples, but that when we're willing to look at the full spectrum of life and not deny the dark, scary parts, we can actually be more effective in both our personal and our greater lives. And I feel like for right now, I'll just stop and see if anybody has any questions. Nice, I'll take a deep breath. All right, well, no questions. Let me tell you. Sure, yeah.
Are you going to elaborate any more on the cover-ups or who the people are?
You know,
and also because somebody was telling me the other day that this is a spiritual teacher and minister and reader, very psychic. She said she has a lot of information, but she cannot reveal it. But she kind of made an inference that some of these people are really, I don't want to say aliens, but they're people, they're beings who are outside, they're not earth people, so to speak, and they want to get rid of everybody here on Earth because they want to take over the Earth.
Okay, so the question is, am I going to be elaborating more on the cover-ups and maybe even the possibility that the alien presence can be causing problems on the planet? And I'll tell you that actually originally I was going to do that, but I took a straw poll here, and there's only a few people who are really focused on that interest tonight. So afterwards, I'd be happy to give you a little update. I know a lot about that. I can tell you that I personally am deeply convinced that the alien presence that is here, the UFO presence, there are some species that are not too far advanced of Earth that still cause problems. It's kind of like Star Trek is what I tell people.
Right.
But that there's actually think about it. The universe has been around, what we currently believe it's been around 13 billion years, I believe, or 17 billion, somewhere around there. Which is interesting in itself because 1,000 years ago, we were firmly convinced that the universe was 4,000 years old. And that number's just kept growing. So in another 100 years, we may add on another 100 billion, by the way. So let's just take it all with a grain of salt. But anyway, at least billions of years, right? So just imagine if there's one Earth-like planet somewhere in some far galaxy that developed just 1 million out of billions of years in advance of us. Just 1 million years. How far will we advance in 1 million years if we survive and continue to grow at this rate? Think about it, 1 million years. And what I've always said from the time I was a kid, even though I didn't fully believe in UFOs, I talked even with my dad, he reminded me about this, that I said, well, if there's UFOs out there, they must be advanced enough spiritually that they've learned to get along and they're not going to be a threat to us. So it really is my firm conviction that though there are some Klingon-type races, like in the Star Treks, that like to stir up havoc and cause problems, that there is some sort of galactic federation and maybe intergalactic federation where these groups have been around for millions, if not billions of years, and developed a deep spiritual understanding, and they are more or less watching the Earth. And how many know what the Prime Directive is in Star Trek? The Prime Directive is you never interfere in developing planets until they develop interplanetary travel. Because, it's like now we used to destroy Aboriginal tribes. Remember that, the Indians, many people believe it was the right thing to wipe out the Indians so the white man was just superior, could own things. Now we believe that Aborigines have to be protected because it's a very special, unique culture, and we try our best not to disturb them. Minimal, only if really they have an epidemic or something like that do we go in and really intervene. Well, think about it, if it was an intergalactic thing. Well, if you have this advanced beings, okay, we need to let this planet develop its own unique flavor. And only when we're ready and people already believe in UFOs and intergalactic travel, then they become part of the Galactic Federation. So, in quick answer to your question, I believe it's much more like, Star Trek is much more real than anybody would ever imagine.
Well, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
One question, just speaking sort of out of my own experience, do you feel like there is a major correlation for most of focus on this kind of subject matter and then it appears more in the dream world or shamanistic world or however you want to...
Great. You're interested in this sort of shamanistic perspective, like how much do we create it through our beliefs?
Possibly. I'm just speaking from experience of where when I was focusing on my shamanistic trainings that all of a sudden these kind of things were happening and I had to kind of for a while because it's a little too much for me to deal with.
Well, I'll tell you so that I hope you don't mind me doing these straw polls, but it helps me to answer questions. How many of you explore shamanistic works, diving deep within to alternative realities? Quite a few, over half. So in the shamanistic world, you start coming to the realization that our beliefs have a great influence on what actually happens in our lives, but also unexpected things can show up. And what I've come to found an answer to your question is that we all have places that we cover up in our lives, like things that we do that we decide, we don't do this consciously, but it's kind of like, I'm just going to forget about that. Sometimes when your wife or your husband says some comment that is really hits to the core, and it's like, I don't really want to look at that, and you can actually kind of believe they didn't really say it. Our minds are amazing. I've seen it happen in my own mind. I've really tried to develop an observer to catch those things, and I've literally had thoughts where I literally go, whoa, wait a minute, what was that? And it was ready to disappear. And because I've had that intention cut, I was just going to drop this important thing, and I could see why. It's like I was trying to fool myself. And so in the shamanistic path, you find we all do have repressed areas. And when you do the shamanistic work and you're ready for it, it's going to come up. And there's the individual repressed and there's the collective repressed. And the collective repressed is what is showing up as, I believe, all these cover-ups like on wanttoknow.info. And so on Shamanic Journey, you can have some pretty scary creatures, aliens, all sorts of stuff come up, which, how real is it? And, I have become convinced that there is a reality. Is what's happening on a shamanic journey actually part of that? I personally believe actually it is. And that, yes, you have to be ready. And I don't recommend people go too deep into wanttoknow.info unless they really feel called. I do recommend everybody have a basic education. I think everybody in this world should be taught the basics of how we are manipulating and fooling ourselves collectively. But I, for various reasons, have felt a deep calling that is one big piece of my work. But many people it's not. And if you're not ready for it, I don't recommend you go there. Wait, do your work. But eventually, if you can, go back and then start looking at it and processing it because it came to you for a reason, that then there's a real power to that. So I do want to mention just this, so we've kind of gone into that interesting shadow dancer, as I call myself a shadow dancer, which is kind of controversial. A lot of my friends are pretty strongly identified with light workers. I want to be really clear, I have absolutely nothing against light workers. I think it's vital, important work. I am a light worker. The only reason I call myself a shadow dancer is because so many people call themselves light workers, and I'm trying to say they're dark, they're bad, they're evil. And not everybody, but a lot of light workers are out to banish the darkness. What is the darkness? What is dark, fertile soil? Dark, fertile soil is where you plant a seed. It's actually fertilized with things that are breaking down and crumbling, and sometimes manure. I mean, sometimes even the SH word, right? It's right there to fertilize the seeds. And from that darkness grows this glorious new plant. So the reason I call myself a shadow dancer is not because I'm not a light worker, I am. But it's because I want to encourage people to look at what they mean when they say they're a light worker. My favorite term is love worker, because I think love worker is great. But I'm a little bit of somebody who likes to stir people up. I love having nice connections with you all, but if you get close to me, I'm going to challenge you, and I want to be challenged too. My best friend, who's my former girlfriend, she challenged me in such beautiful ways. We challenge each other, and we love it. And what I loved about her, I met her 10 years ago, and it was within like 3 weeks. We were having this pretty strong disagreement, argument. You know, even after 3 weeks, we're still madly in love. And I just knew on this one thing, I just knew I was right. And the funny thing is, so she stopped at one point. So we're engaged, and she stopped, and she took some breath, and said, "You know what? You're right. I'm full of it." She actually said that. I was like, "Whoa, that is amazing." And that encouraged me to do more of the same, and that's been our relationship ever since. It's like when we've developed all these tools in our relationship to literally stop when we're stuck. That's our key word. One of us will say, "We're stuck." And when we get that, "Oh, we're stuck," that means stop. That means pull out our tool bag, and we have all these tools. Her favorite, she'll go out on a walk and just walk. And so she comes back, "Okay, now I'm ready." Or for me, exercise is great for me. I'll go out and just like pump, run, do something like that. But we're not afraid to face the shadow side of our relationship and really look at it, and that's been so magical. And like we've developed this whole tool bag, which is fun. Sometimes I think I ought to put it up there. So I very much like these websites. Let me show you this, the next. So want to know, I told you about Global Community for All, which kind of faded away, and then want to know.info was the next one to go big, and actually now it gets over 3,000 visits every day from all over the world. And we have an email list for that website that's now, it's just about to pass 7,000 subscribers. And these are all people who subscribe to themselves. We never add somebody to our list. And it's become very popular, and said it's had a huge impact. But the third website was a wonderful counterbalance to that, called the Web of Love. And what the Web of Love is imagine if each of us is actually somehow energetically connected through our hearts. That between me and each of you and each person here, there's kind of like an energetic cord that is a heart energy love cord between us all. I firmly believe that that really does exist, even though we can't see it. And that cord exists, and it connects us with every being on the planet. So we're all interconnected through this web of love. And what that website is all about is bringing that into people's consciousness, that we all are interconnected. And that when we remember this and breathe this into our lives, we can really start transforming. And there's one short little exercise right on the home page, which I just love and I still use all the time. It's 2 simple sentences that you use with the breath. On the deep in-breath, you say, "Your sacred love flows into me." You breathe that in. Just as you're thinking, "Your sacred love flows into me." And then on the out-breath, "My sacred love flows out to you." And what I like to do and encourage on the website is that you can actually imagine that happening. As I'm breathing in, I'm imagining a cord of love coming from you, your sacred love flowing into my heart. And on the out-breath, "My sacred love flowing out to your heart." And you can literally imagine this with your spouse or your lover, with your child, your parents. And then you can, with groups, like I'm involved in several communities. Love my dance community, wonderful people, and just imagine that whole group, breathing love with them. And then you can imagine the whole world, and just breathe that with the whole world. And I found sometimes when I sit and do that for 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour or 2, doing that meditative breathing practice, it's amazing. It's amazing how it shifts me, it shifts the way people respond to me, and it's just a really rich experience.
Weboflove.org.
Yeah. So that was kind of the next website, which is really, you can see it's a huge counterbalance. There's nothing, well, there's a little bit in one section about cover-ups, because all the websites lead back to each other. So like if you go deep into Want to Know It, if you go deep enough, it starts talking about the spiritual underpinnings of all the cover-ups, and then it leads you into the Web of Love. So it's interesting how they're kind of counterbalanced. But Web of Love is almost totally about the love and bringing more love into our life and world. So why don't we take a break? It's just about 8. Let's break for about 7 minutes. And I'd be happy to answer any questions up here in the meantime, and then we can dive in some more. There's lots of more fun stuff, and then tell stories and question time. So let's take a break.
Just to ask, does your card include most or all of the websites? Or?
No, it's an old card. We now have a website that lists all of them. And so if you Google peers, we do show up in the top 10, but you can see it's written in there, Public Education Empowerment Resource Service. If you Google that, you'll get it. If you want the URL right now, it's peerservice.org. www.peerservice.org. And there's pretty much something for everybody there. In fact, believe it or not, we have a lot of very conservative supporters, like really self-identified right-wing supporters, because one of the things that we really try to do always is to bring us together. Just a funny little example of that. I'm actually here at a summer camp up outside of Jacksonville. There's an adult summer camp that's a lot of fun with friends that I'm with, and there's about 90 of us. And a few years ago, they do this circle thing where they say, everybody who's here from outside of Oregon, go to the center. And so we all go to the center and cheer. And you can call out whatever you like. Everybody here who has kids, go to the center. And then somebody said, everybody here who supports Bush, go to the center. And nobody went to the center. And I just said, this is not right. This is creating a divisive energy in our world. And I went and stood in the center. And I said, I absolutely don't support Bush's policies. I support him as a beautiful spiritual being, just like every one of you and me, and I invite you to join me in that. And it wasn't easy for me to do that. I mean, the vibe was like anti-Bush, But I'll tell you, I am a stand for not making anybody in their essence bad or evil. I will do everything I can to stop destructive behavior. To stop, if I see some burglar trying to do something and I can get in and stop him, I will. I will take away a gun, I might even do violence to stop a greater violence, if it was really clear that was the best thing to do. I will do everything I can to stop negative behavior or destructive behavior. But you can go all over Want to Know, which is kind of the cover-up website. You will not see anywhere there any comments about making anybody bad. And so that's one of the key hallmarks. We get lots of email, and so many people who are on spiritual paths who know there's something weird going on, and they don't know what it is, and they come to our website and go, thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting me know what's going on without making people afraid, with actually empowering me to feel like I can do something. And a lot of our pages, we have, here's what you can do. For instance, we have create a special web page that makes it very easy to contact any of your political or media representatives. We have their phone numbers, fax numbers, and it's very easy to access. And there's many other things you can do. So I want to tell you about sort of one more thing about the evolution of those websites. The one that came after Web of Love. It's called Moment of Love. And it's our sort of basic introductory website. What we realized is we needed a website that would really appeal to everybody. Web of Love, of course, is going to appeal to all of our light worker and love worker friends. I mean, it's just a resonance. That's what we're about, spreading love and feeling the love. But as you know, a lot of traditional Americans and traditional people in the world is like, don't give me that woo-woo stuff. They're not going to be interested in Web of Love. So we came up with a website that's called Moment of Love. And we tried to come up with a short way of opening people to one of the things in the break I was talking about. What Gandhi said was that the heart of all religions lead to the same thing. Something like that. The essence or heart of all religions is the same. And I really do believe that if you go to the core, that the interpretation gets crazy. And so we created the Moment of Love website, which starts off with this simple sentence. Every person in the world has a heart. If you really just think about that one sentence, every person in the world has a heart. George W. Bush has a heart. Dick Cheney has a heart. That's not an uncommon reaction. And you know there's a part of you that feels that, and another part that knows it's true. Dick Cheney was once a little baby laughing and crying. I was having dinner with Jordan and some friends and mentioning to them a personal, very good friend of mine was Dick Cheney's golf caddy 30 years ago. Golf caddy 30 years ago. He said he was a great guy, so fun. Now, I know from my personal interactions with him and from other people, he's not fun anymore. But let's not forget that he once was an innocent little baby too, and he had all sorts of things that happened to him that caused him to become who he is. And maybe if this is all a divine play and we really are all mirrors of God unfolding, he's playing his own vital role. What if we all are really deep spiritual beings, and before we came into these bodies we said, well, who wants to play this role and who wants to be a Dick Cheney? Would you have volunteered to be Dick Cheney? That's going to be a hard role to play. So who wants to play Dick Cheney? Maybe he's actually playing the tougher role than all of us, and he really is a part of this divine unfolding. So this is what I'm to stand for, and that's what Moment of Love is all about. Think about it. Any Muslim, Hindu, even atheist, every person in the world has a heart. And then the next line is, every heart has a place within that wants only to love and be loved. Every heart has a place somewhere in their heart. The discussion over dinner was, how about sociopaths? And there was a little disagreement. My own belief is even sociopaths, for those of you who know really what that's about, even sociopaths were once little babies laughing and wanting nothing but love and to love and be loved. Yeah. So we consider Moment of Love to be our introductory website for people who are skeptical about spirituality or anything like that. If you want to kind of spread this kind of information, you send them to Moment of Love first. And it's
Send them to where?
momentoflove.org. And it just really takes it basic. And Moment of Love then most leads into the Web of Love. So we feel like when they've then opened up to that possibility that we are all beings that on some level desire love, that then maybe they're open to this heart connection. What happened later is we developed so much good information. There's lots of great information on both Moment of Love and Web of Love, and even want to know, we have information on identifying and working with your core issues. Because as we said, I'm all about balancing the light and the shadow, integrating them. It's not just balancing, it's integrating them and really creating a new interconnectedness, a new wholeness. So even on the Want to Know website, we have links to people develop your life purpose. How many of you here just are pretty clear on what your life purpose or what your life intentions are? Great, that's not bad. Really, that's unusual. About 2/3 of people raise their hands. So I applaud you, those of you who've done that. If you haven't, no problem, but I encourage you to start. I find that you can call it calling in energies, prayer, whatever you call it. Send out a call for guidance in working on your intentions or purpose. Some people prefer purpose. I like intentions because intentions give me a clear direction, but I'm not reaching for any goal. But purpose is great too, whatever works for you. One friend of mine calls it his life, his mission statement. If it's a mission statement. But if you get clear on that and you wake up every morning and say, here's what I really want in my life, and you do that every morning, I can almost guarantee your life will transform. And that's what I've been doing for years now, and believe me, I can tell you miracle after miracle after miracle that's happened in my life. It's really amazing.
You know what I do every morning before I get up?
What's that?
I send love to my whole body, to my DNA, my brain,
Beautiful.
my lungs, my bones, my liver,
Beautiful.
everything.
I'm going to repeat this because it's also being taped and I want everybody to be able to hear this. She says she wakes up every morning and sends love to all the different parts of herself, her body, her cells, her DNA, and just to enliven herself. That's beautiful. I'd also encourage you, if you do that, also have the external, send out some love to people in your family and your friends.
Oh, yeah, to the country, to the world.
The country and the world, absolutely. That I assume many of you here are, I also call myself an energy worker. You know, the scientific paradigm, which I always thought I was going to be a scientist. I did very well in science in school, and it just seemed natural, and I was really interested in becoming like an ecologist or something like that. And then I got interested in people in college, and it all changed. But the scientific paradigm says it's only real if you can touch it, if you can hear it, if you can taste it. It's only real if it's 5 senses. So what does that say about love? There's a great cartoon on one of our websites that says, it's talking about, well, you can't convince me of that because I can't see it or feel it or whatever it is. And the guy, they're called sacred cow cartoons. It's kind of fun because it makes fun of all our sacred cows, and there's 2 cows talking to each other. And so the other one says, so how does that work in your love life? And the other cow says, oh, dude, I guess that's my problem.
What?
He said, oh, dude, I guess that's my problem. He obviously didn't have a good love life. Well, if you're a real scientist who doesn't believe in love, that's not going to do much for your relationships. Because there's love. Can you taste love? Can you see it? Can you hear it? So, but we're really brought up through our school system that it has to be something you can quantify in order for it to be real. Now, we have the social sciences, which the hard sciences are always making fun of, that are trying to quantify love and trying to quantify this and that. But to me, what about if we'd say that it's not just the 5 senses? What if energy is real, even if it can't be seen? And so we ended up having all this great information. We have the life purpose, we have life intentions, we have things dealing with how to work with judgment, which is one of my big things. Having arrogance, one of the key qualities of arrogance is I'm all the time wanting to make myself right and you wrong, and say, oh, well, you know, if you did this, you could be better, and which is basically convincing myself that I'm better than you. So there's all these different tools that you can use. And just so you know, if you go to the websites, the links, there's a list of links on the left-hand side of many of the websites that include these things. And we got so much good information, so I said, wow, we should really make a free online course out of all this information. And so that was our next step, which we started just about, I guess, 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And so we've developed now 4 online courses, all free, that take you through all of this wonderfully empowering information. And one of the things, because many of these websites have become quite popular, last year, I think total, we got 3 million visits to our websites collectively. So people are really spreading the word. But because of that, people are emailing us all the time with this fantastic information. We do get a lot of information on cover-ups. I've gotten key contacts, people who are government insiders, who see what we're doing and saying, how can I help you? And I end up on the phone with them and they say, well, you should know about this and this and this. Some of them even willing to reveal, just a quick aside because it's so fascinating. One of my best contacts is a former CIA deep cover, 25 years deep cover CIA. And he is an amazing, brilliant man who was involved in mind control, and he was mind controlled and all this sort of stuff. And he actually has a major website that's all about revealing what's going on in intelligence in the world. So he's got his own little thing that he's doing. But he's been given permission to talk about all sorts of stuff. And so he's willing to give name, rank, and serial number. And I have media people, journalists, contact me and say, well, we might be interested in doing an interview. And I'll send them a few of our key people that are willing to talk and give them their names and everything. They never want to talk to him. I can tell you, they're literally afraid of this stuff, most journalists, because it's like, oh, no, 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 no. And they know it's a hard sell. Like I said, the head of the CIA talking about UFOs, where did that end up? Page L30 on a Sunday paper. You can see it, by the way. You go to the New York Times website, it tells you what page it was on. That's why we know.
Do they have the same thing in Europe? Cover-ups like here in the United States?
In other countries? Yes. Yeah. What happens in the United States is generally happening in other countries as well. So because we have all of these people sending us information, both cover-up and inspiring, we get some of the most inspiring stuff out there. We have some amazing videos. Some of them, I'm sure some of you know. How many have seen the Free Hugs video?
The what is it?
The Free Hugs video. I mean, isn't that awesome? First time I saw it, I was just crying. I mean, it was a whole movement about this guy who goes out and just holds up a sign and says, free hugs. And it is the most inspiring. It inspired a whole movement which has gone worldwide. You can now watch videos of the Free Hugs movement. Free Hugs. Free Hugs. Yeah. So that's just one example. We have so many others that you watch these videos, and I'll be surprised if it doesn't move you deeply, if not bring tears to your eyes. And so in 2 of our courses, we actually mix the inspiration with the cover-up information. So it's like if you're willing to really understand on a relatively deep, not super deep, but a relatively deep level what's happening both on the deeper hidden levels in our world and the powerfully inspiring. I mean, you will be so richly inspired. We couldn't get the AV system working because I have an amazing, how many know, what's his name? Paul?
Hawkins.
Paul Hawkins. Paul Hawkins' Blessed Unrest. Anybody here know about him? It's this amazing talk that he gives where he talks about there is a movement, a huge movement, which is transforming our world, which so very few people are aware of. And back on the screen, he's talking at something called the Pioneers Conference. This was a wonderful transformation conference in Marin County. On the screen, he has a list of names of nonprofit organizations from around the world that are doing work to transform our planet. And he says, you see this list, and they come rolling down, and the names just keep rolling and rolling. He's talking. You see this list. There are some here from all over the world: Poland, Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, and the United States. All different topics. And as he's talking, they just keep rolling and rolling. And he says, not only are there all these groups, you have no idea. We have gathered a registry. We now have the names of over 250,000 nonprofits dedicated to transforming our world. And as he talks, he goes on for about 6 minutes. The list keeps speeding up and up. And he says, if we were to show you at the original speed, it would take weeks for you to see the names of all of these. And so it gets, this whole list just starts speeding up, and they're all, and I even recognized a few of them as he's going down. It's like, wow. Can you imagine? This is not individual people. This is 250,000 organizations around the world dedicated to transforming our planet.
This is videos?
This is a video. If you type in Blessed Unrest into Google Video, you can watch that video. David Hawkins.
What's it called?
Blessed Unrest. So I apologize we couldn't get the AV working, but that's the kind of stuff that we have. And so we interweave the cover-up stuff, but like the last 2 lessons will leave you nothing but inspired. I'm sure a lot of you know about the Indigo Children. There's this one woman, you probably know about James Twyman, who lives out in this area somewhere. And James Twyman has this 10-year-old indigo girl who does this artwork. Akiana is her name. Some of you know Akiana? She paints at 10 years old like a genius. I mean, you have to see this stuff. You would say there's no way in the world a 10-year-old could paint that. But they have video of her painting it, and it just boggles your mind. And that's just an indication that maybe some special souls are being born on this planet right now to help us move through the difficult time we're facing right now. So the exciting things about these courses is you will be so deeply informed, but also richly inspired to go out and transform the world. And not that money is any measure of success, but these are all free. But at the end, we do invite people to donate, and the average donation has been $200, which for a free online course is pretty decent. About 50% of the people donate, and 50% don't. We don't require it. It's not necessary. But most people feel like it was worth it. In fact, we get comments. We have a comments page that you can read some people's comments, and many people have written and said, literally transformed their lives going through these things, that they could understand things that didn't make sense before, from both the sort of love and light aspect and the cover-up aspect. So I invite you to take a look at some of our courses that, if you're interested in metaphysics, and this is a metaphysical place, you will like our deepest course, which is called the Transformation Course. And it goes deeper in all ways, and it gives comes from the perspective that there is this all that is. There's a collective consciousness with which each of us is interacting. And when you understand that and put everything in that perspective, it really makes sense from the metaphysical. But not everybody in this world is interested in metaphysics. And so we have what we call our secular version of the transformation course, which gives the same powerful basic materials, but doesn't have any sort of spiritual language. It does talk about love. It does include the moment of love, about every person has a heart. So from that perspective, it's spiritual, but it never talks about God or collective consciousness or anything like that. So for your non-spiritual friends, you can send them to what we call the Insight course. And it's a rich journey without that deep spirituality. And then there's 2 other courses, because we have many people who really want to dive into the cover-ups. Most people call it conspiracies. I avoid the word conspiracy because it has such negative connotations. You will hardly find that word anywhere in our stuff, because yes, there are conspiracies. Who knows what conspire really means? The word conspire, what does it mean?
Breathe together.
Thank you. Conspire means to breathe together. And the meaning of that word has been so corrupted. And what conspiracy theorists and all that sort of stuff. And thankfully not many people accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist, because I'm really not. In that meaning of the word. Do I believe there are conspiracies? Yes. There's conspiracy, that 4 hijackers conspired together to take down the World Trade Centers. I mean, that's the official story, is a conspiracy. So yes, there are conspiracies, but my belief, the deepest conspiracy, is that, as Rob Bresney, a world-renowned astrologer, says, the deepest conspiracy is that the whole world is conspiring to shower blessings on us. He's written a whole book on that. It's called Paranoia. Awesome book. Paranoia is the antidote to paranoia. And so his book, and this man knows about all the cover-ups. He is actually aware of all this stuff, and he doesn't bring it into the book, but he lets you know, for those of us who know, that he is aware of this stuff. And yet his book is just a riot. It's fun. His name's Rob Bresney. But if you just Google Paranoia, and you'll come up with Rob Bresney's work. And it is so fun, because that's what I really believe on the deepest level. Each of us is conspiring to shower us all, and each of us with blessings. We just don't realize it. But we're getting there. Thanks to you and me and the work that we're all doing.
Does Hollywood go to, is anybody in Hollywood?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to wait until the end, unless it's really important. I appreciate your
No, I was
questions.
just wondering if anybody in Hollywood, Stephen, is going to make a
Let's
movie.
talk about it afterwards, okay?
Okay.
Thanks. So I did want to jump into the part about mirrors of God unfolding. How many of you are aware of the holographic model of consciousness? About 10, again, out of about 30 here. Holographic. You know what a hologram is? A true hologram. How many have been to Disneyland and seen the holograms there, where it's a projection, but it's fully 3-dimensional? That's what a true hologram is. The way it works is they take 2 lasers and they shine it through a prism, and it hits an object and is recorded on a film, and it becomes a series of concentric circles and diffractions on this film. And so the 2 lasers somehow going through the prism create a recorded image on flat 2-dimensional film. When the lasers are shined through the film at the same angle with the prism, it then projects outward. And for instance, if it was an apple, you would literally see an image of an apple floating out in space. You guys haven't been to Hollywood and seen there's a head in Disneyland. There's a head in the haunted house that's a 3-dimensional hologram. So a true hologram, and you can look this up on the internet, does it now. But the fascinating thing about holograms, you take that film, let's say it's 4x6 piece of film, you cut it in half, and you shine the lasers through it. What happens if you cut that image in half?
You can still see
The whole apple is still there, it's half as bright. So the entire apple is there, but it's half as bright. Isn't that bizarre? And then you cut it in quarters, and you've got 1 quarter left, you shine it through, the whole apple is still there. But it's 1/4 as bright. You cut it down to 1/1,000,000th of that film. Literally, 1/1,000,000th of that film. You shine the laser through there at the right angle, the entire apple appears, but it is 1/1,000,000th as bright. Of course, with the scientific instruments, they can pick it up. But every piece, and believe me, this has become scientific and philosophical and spiritual debate, that every piece of this film contains the whole within it. So it's called the holographic model of consciousness. And one of the best books I've ever read is called, what's the name of it? Thank you. The Holographic Universe, Michael Talbot. And he presents it just so beautifully, this whole paradigm. And so his theory, and the theory of many of these sort of deep spiritual, religious, and even quantum physicists are now talking about this, that within every being, within everything, the entire universe is enfolded. So if you think about it, and I know this is hard to believe, but if you think about that holographic film, and this is what's leading to that, and deep energy studies, quantum physics, I say, is now realizing how much our consciousness creates what's happening. And if you get into quantum physics, it gets really bizarre. Tao of Physics is a great book for introducing that kind of stuff. But think about it. Some of you may know the term the Akashic records, which is where supposedly the records of everything in existence that has ever happened exist in this other dimensional plane. Well, what if the Akashic records exist within you and within every cell of your being? And this is what some of the deepest spiritual thinkers now are talking about around the planet. That every one of us is a manifestation of this collective energy in some way that we don't understand. And everybody who's talking about this, including the quantum physicists, saying it's a mystery. We're getting that maybe it's holographic, and there's more and more agreement that, particularly among the quantum physicists, which is interesting because they're the hardest science people, that actually we're all a hologram. You know, the image, it's not a pretty image, but I imagine this huge undulating being that on the surface of it has all these kind of little fingers sticking out. And each of those fingers is a consciousness that has a body and eyes. And it's like they're all interacting with each other, and they think they're separate because they're on the surface looking at each other, but somehow they're all intimately interconnected. You know, there's a common buzzwords that we're all one. If you really think about it, there's no way we're all one. If we're all one, what are you doing sitting there? I'm here, right? If you think about it logically, there's no way we're all one. And yet that phrase resonates with so many of us. Why does it resonate? Well, maybe we're all so intimately interconnected in this holographic projection of divine unfolding that we are in some way one. The way I look at it is that we are, there's a great quote. I'll read it to you. I did bring this. This is from Nipawanak, who was an Arapaho Indian. In some mysterious and wonderful way, you are a part of everything. And in that same mysterious and wonderful way, everything is a part of you. And I think that's what we're getting at when we're talking about we're all one, that we're all from that same essence. In our core, we're all divine. And I think most of you here came to listen because you know this already, and you like it to be reinforced by somebody who's explored this a lot. So I'm wanting just to invite you to step even further into that and take it even to those who you hold judgment for. We all have some judgments. Whoever it is, whether it's Dick Cheney, whether it's your mom who did whatever to you, or your dad, whether it's a former lover or just a boss, not wanting to downplay any damage done. Whoever did that is a divine spirit. And when you send love to the core of their being, it changes them. It changes you. And again, I'm saying stop the destructive behavior. I'm not saying don't step in when somebody is destructive. We need the policemen when there's a mass brawl going on to come in and break it up. But I worked on a psychiatric unit as a nurse, and I worked with some of the most mentally disturbed people. We were on a locked ward, and sometimes people would go so crazy we literally had to do what we call takedowns. 4 staff one's assigned to each leg, one's assigned to each arm, because these people are very dangerous, even though they don't have knives because they were taken away to get in. Some of them very strong, and people have gotten hurt and killed. So we do it on the call. If they're out of control, boom, jump, pin them down, and have to literally put them in 4-point restraints. Sounds very inhumane, but when somebody's going literally crazy, which happens, believe me, it happens, that is the right course of action. And that is where I refined my ability on the psych wards to do that with love. I literally could go and tackle somebody and take them down and feel it. Well, it was easy in the beginning because I worked with children. And when you've got a biting, screaming 8-year-old just going totally out of control, it's actually easier to feel that love because you know that this is just a child that has been hurt, been raped again and again, and they're only 8 years old. And yes, we got to take them down, even if an 8-year-old. But you can just say, and I love you. Even as we're taking them, even as they spit in my face, literally, spit in my face and try to bite me. So I had some good practice. And I'm inviting you to start developing a muscle. Look at your life. Who are you feeling judgment toward? Who have you not let go of that, whatever it is you have? Not wanting to downplay that you got hurt. But when you start connecting with their divine, with the interconnectedness that we have even with them, that's when we're doing what I call the shadow dance. And shadow dance is not scary. It's not easy. It's stepping out of your comfort zone. But it's powerful and it's transformative. So I want to leave time for questions, but I want to leave you with this one great piece. It's called a spiritual conspiracy. Getting back to that word, conspiracy. On the surface of our world right now, there is war, violence, and craziness. And things may seem dark, but calmly and quietly, at the same time, something is happening underground. An inner revolution is taking place, and certain individuals are being called to a higher light. It is a silent revolution from the inside out, from the ground up. This is a global cooperation that has sleeper cells in every nation. It is a planetary spiritual conspiracy. You won't likely see us on TV. You won't read about us in the newspaper. You won't hear from us on the radio. We don't seek glory. We don't wear any uniform. We come in all shapes and sizes, colors and styles. We're in every country and culture of the world, in cities big and small, mountains and valleys, in farms and villages, tribes and remote islands. Most of us work anonymously, seeking not recognition of name, but profound transformation of life. Working quietly behind the scenes, you could pass by one of us on the street and not even notice. We go undercover, not concerned for who takes the final credit, but simply that the work gets done. Many of us may seem to have normal jobs, but behind the external storefront is where the deeper work takes place. With the individual and collective power of our minds and hearts, we spread passion, knowledge, and joy to all. Some call us the conscious army, as together we co-create a new world. Our orders come from the Spiritual Intelligence Agency, the SIA, instructing us to drop soft, secret love bombs when no one is looking. That breathing, when you breathe in something, that's a secret love bomb. We each express ourselves in our own unique ways with our own unique gifts and talents. Be the change you want to see in the world. That is the motto at fills our hearts. We know this is the path to profound transformation. We know that quietly and humbly, individually and collectively, we have the power of all the oceans combined. At first glance, our work is not even visible. It is slow and meticulous, like the formation of mountains. And yet with our combined efforts, entire tectonic plates are being shaped and moved for centuries to come. Love is the religion we come to share, and you don't need to be highly educated or have exceptional knowledge to understand it. Love arises from the intelligence of the heart, embedded in the timeless evolutionary pulse of all living beings. Be the change you want to see in the world. Nobody else can do it for you. Yet don't forget, we are all here supporting you. We are now recruiting. Perhaps you will join us, or already have. For in this spiritual conspiracy, all are welcome and all are loved. The door is always open. So I'll take a deep breath. So I apologize, we only have about, looks like 15 minutes? That's not too bad, 15 minutes for questions. So.
Real quick, who's the author of that?
This, by the way, this was inspired by Brian Pierre Grossi, who wrote a book called The Big Glow. And it's spread around the internet and it's been changed some, so it's not like his original, but the originator of it was Brian Pierre Grossi, and you can come up and look at it here afterwards if you like. Yes?
I was just wondering, can you talk a little bit about how you explored your own personal shadow? Or is that too...
No, that's fine. I guess first thing was to come to the realization that I had one, because I was in total denial. I didn't think I had any problems. Like I said, arrogance was my core issue. So literally, if I was in my early 20s, you know those interviews they say, so what's your weaknesses, which is one of the key things they look at, I would literally go, do I have any serious weaknesses? And compared to most people, quite honestly, I had a relatively healthy upbringing and my life has been much easier than most. I feel like I'm very blessed, which allows me to do the work that I do. But I did have problems, and it wasn't until actually I went to China and found myself so competitive with the ping pong players in China because they were so good, and I could almost always beat people. I'm pretty talented in sports. I could usually beat people, but I would let them beat me half the time. So like that was the way, you know, my arrogance, by the way, was masked because I was beaten down. I'm what I call an overcompensator, because I know if I show my arrogance, I'll get beaten down. So I pretend I'm humble, and yet I do everything I can to make sure I believe I'm the best in the world. So it's a little perverted form of arrogance. So when I went to China, and I was like, I couldn't beat these guys, and I had to really start asking myself, because I was into spirituality, I said, why am I getting so competitive with these guys? Because they're beating me all the time. It's because, like, well, if I only had as much time and as experience as now, I'd be whipping their, you know. But and then I started realizing, my God, I really am arrogant. That I need to beat these people in order to feel good about myself. And so it was just becoming aware, for the first time really in my late 20s, I was living in China for 2 years, that arrogance was an issue. And so it was getting the awareness that I actually had this shadow stuff. And once I started getting that, then I said, if there's that, there must be more too. And I became much more open and really sort of invited my friends to start helping me work on this stuff. If you're interested and have not done it much, I think the absolute best thing you can do is to open to divine guidance. I mean, I believe we all have divine guidance. Even if you don't believe in the divine, you probably consider that we have a higher self or a deeper self and work with that and say, help me to see the parts of me where I am being blind. Or however words you want to use it, help me to see the ways that I am disempowering myself and not allowing myself to be the full, beautiful manifestation that I know I am.
Thank you, that's actually what I do, but I didn't want you to use a specific process, but it's just an unfolding.
Yeah. For those who are interested, a lot of the stuff we have on our websites is compilations from other people's great stuff, like that poem, the best that's out there. But there's a few things I have written, and one is called Simple Keys to a Fuller Life. And on most of the websites, it says, I think, Keys to Life, if you click on that link. And I can tell you what they are. Number one, I've already told you, it's my deepest intentions. I'll do my best to choose what's best for all. So it's basically that commitment to what's best for all, which includes me. Number two, and these two are far above the most important, I open to guidance from the divine in this. And my prayer to the divine is always help me to be of service to all. So those are the two key ones, but after that, it's number three is acceptance and understanding. Because I find that when we really come to truly and fully accept all parts of ourselves and all parts of the universe as this hologram, this divine unfolding, magic happens. And it's not easy, because we're all like have parts that we reject ourselves, we reject others. But if you continually work on that. And then number four is love and empowerment. So it was all about just feeling the love and spreading the love and finding ways to nurture, support, and empower each other. So, and it's got some great little ideas in that. I've written like a 7-page piece on.
Which website is this on?
It's on most, the first few that I talked about. It is on Antidote, because we have a whole inspiration section even on that site. It's on What Moment of Love and Web of Love in the left-hand column. Look for Keys to Life. If you Google Keys to Life, we're actually usually number 2. So you can just Google Keys to Life and look for the Web of Love link. Sure. Thank you. Any other questions? Somebody just thought it would be interesting to ask, so how many of you think you might be interested in exploring a little bit of sort of like wanttoknow.info and show the cover-up stuff? No pressure, just curious. Cool, that's great, because I asked at the beginning, and I actually was planning to talk much more about this because in the past, that's who's come. And so we end up talking a lot more about that, and in the beginning there was only 3 or 4, so I didn't talk as much about it.
I wasn't here for the beginning to hear the straw poll, but it's within me. I mean, personally, I'm looking at the present situation, and so I would like you to, just your take, I'd like to hear your take on the present administration and
Oh, sure, yeah.
et cetera, because this is the present moment.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a good one. Like, well, what do I think about Obama in relation to all these cover-ups and stuff? We talked about it the break with a couple people, and for me, here's the magic about Obama, and I really do like Obama, and yes, I think in some ways he's manipulated. You cannot help the higher up you go, and I saw this. Being an interpreter, you're lucky because you're neutral. You're not being influenced by the same power forces they are, but you get to see it. You see how money influences people. I don't care how good you are. I can see if I was in that position, it's like, whoa, well, you make $100,000 if you do this, and $10,000 if you do this, and it's not that different, but actually this $10,000 one's the better thing, but it's not that much different. Won't you take the $100,000? You may think you won't, but you be in that position, especially with all the pressures and stuff. Everybody who moves up the ranks, money becomes a powerful influence. And this is what, if I could change with a magic wand, make it 1 person per vote rather than $1 per vote. Our system right now is much more $1 per vote than 1 person, if you understand how lobbying works and all of that. But the magic of Obama, to me, is I have had many close African-American friends in my life, and I love to ask questions that most white folks are afraid to ask. And I say, what's it like being black? Tell me how you've been hurt for being black. And I really appreciate being able to understand where they're coming from in that. And believe me, growing up a black man in the United States is one of the most difficult lives you can choose. And so the fact that a black man was elected president of this country is just unbelievable and amazing. And so I don't care if it was Clarence Thomas, who I really didn't like his politics at all. Even if Clarence Thomas was elected president of the United States, I would say that's a huge healing for the planet. Even though I'd work against his policies, I would say that is a huge healing for this planet. So if nothing else, the fact that this beautiful nothing else, and the fact that an African American was elected president is amazing. The whole world is in awe, going, how could the United States do that? They had developed this opinion of us in the last 8 years that was like... Now the fact that Obama is a spiritual being, and again, I think he is manipulated in some ways, but the fact that he's a spiritual being, and I know he is, that's amazing. It's like, can you believe it? And guess what? He never would have been elected if Bush hadn't won his second term. Think about that. Obama would not be president. I can almost guarantee you if a Democrat had won that second term. So it's a blessing in disguise. And yes, I want a woman president. Let's do that next. You know, but I'm telling you, if you go around and you ask women their wounds, they're definitely deep and hard wounds. I empathize with what the women have to go through in the glass ceiling. It's craziness. But ask your African American friends. Don't be afraid to ask. What's it like? Tell me the difficult times. And not all. I do have a few friends, even African Americans, who have not had too much. But most people, if they're willing to talk to you, and most will, you'll be surprised, listen to the pain of what it's like. And it's not just African Americans, it's Indians, you know, particularly these days, it's if you're Middle Eastern, or even look Middle Eastern. Some Mexicans and Hispanics, or people think they're Middle Eastern. Oh my God, now they're under so much stuff. So, you know, if you are a white male in this society, I would suggest you may think you know and can empathize, but until you go around and ask those questions, don't be afraid to ask, you'll find out. So I love, yes, there is manipulation that goes on at all levels of government. I could talk forever about that, but I am thrilled that he is a deep spiritual person, that he is African American, and that he's a great leader. So, yeah, that's about it. And we have about 1 minute left. Any other fast questions? So I just want to say I am very excited. I really want to encourage you. I mean, one of the main things I'm here to say is there's nothing to be afraid of. If you really start sinking into that holographic model I was talking about, that we're all interconnected, that every being has a heart, it's simply the divine unfolding. You are a mirror of God. I am a mirror of God. Even Dick Cheney is a mirror of God. Remember that role that he had to choose to play. Somebody had to be Judas to make the play happen. There's nothing to fear. In fact, when you recognize fear as an invitation to growth, I have that on my wall, recognize fear as an invitation to growth. Watch what happens in your life. So it's just an invitation to explore becoming friends with the shadow and integrating it all so that we can all birth this new paradigm that is already powerfully happening. So I want to thank each and every one of you, and now I feel like we're connected, and when I do my breathing of love, I'll have you in my energy field. Invite you to join me, invite your friends to join, and the more people that join, that web of love is just going to grow stronger on this planet, and it's undeniable that the new paradigm is going to happen. So, thank you all.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted, and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.